Okay, so now let's look at the method of drawing a graph. So we start with the table method. That is the method that you will be using in grade 8. Unless a table with values in is given to you, you can always choose your own x values. Only 4 input or x values are necessary when drawing a function. Always try to choose negative and positive values. The easiest is to pick 0 and then 2 or 3 values to the left, which is negative, and to the right, which is your positive values. Personally, I always use negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So most of the time, your basic table would be looking like this. Okay, you need to fill in the x values yourself. So what I always do is I start in the middle with 0 and then I fill it up. So 0 to the right is positive, so 1, 2, 3, and to the left is negative, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. This is quite a large table. It has 7 options for values. Sometimes they only give you 4. If they give you 4, again, start with a negative value and go to positive. Try and start at negative 2 or negative 1 at least, so that you've got 1 or 2 negative values as well as some positive values. It's always nice to see what happens around x is 0. That is where the y-axis would be. Okay, so let's write in our values. Okay. Now that we've got values for x, we need to determine y. How are we going to do that? That is where our equation comes in. So, they should always give you a function or an equation to which you can determine y. So, you've done this in number patterns. So, let's see what happens. So, in this case, they tell us that fx is equal to x plus 2. So, that is our equation that we are going to use to determine each of these values. Let's look at green. We start with x plus 2. Fx is x plus 2. Substitute x is negative 3. Then you've got negative 3 in the place of x plus 2. That will give me negative 1. Then I have my first set of coordinates. This negative 1 can be written in your table. Okay, then we move on to the red. In this place of x, we write negative 2. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. There is our second set of coordinates. In this case, the y value is 0. Please note that fx represents y. So in the space of fx, you could have been given y, or a gx, or an hx, but it doesn't matter which way around. The left side is y values, those ones. Okay, let's move on to yellow. Fx is x plus 2, substitute x, and get your next set of coordinates. And so we can move on to purple, which is 0, substitute 0, get your next set of coordinates. X is 1, there's your next set, x is 2, and x is 3. Okay, guys, you have to do these calculations. That is where your marks come from. You are able to do this because you've done expressions and because you've done number patterns. Okay, so when we've got all our coordinates, we can write all our values in a table, and then our table would look like that. Okay, so we've written in all our y values. So now we've got 7 sets of coordinates. Well, we've got that. So now we can move on to drawing the graph. So the first thing we do is we draw our Cartesian plane. If we've done that, then we can start with our x values for our first set of coordinates. So in our first set of coordinates, x is negative 3, y is negative 1. So our first point on the graph is there. The next set, red, negative 2 and 0. X is negative 2, y is 0. Can you see that this point lies on the x-axis? On the x-axis, the value for y will be 0. Doesn't matter where, anywhere on the x-axis, y is 0. The next point, x is negative 1, y is 1. Next one, x is 0. So on the y-axis, doesn't matter where, x will always be 0. So where x is 0, for this graph, y is 2. Our next one, x is 1, y is 3. X is 2, y is 5, x is 3, y is 5. Sorry, guys. Okay, so when we get there, you can see that it is easy to read the horizontal ones when we've got the blue lines there. Okay, so then you put your ruler on the 5 and you know that you have to get to 3, so it would be 3 centimeters dot. This one was 2 centimeters dot. When you've got all your points lined up, you take a ruler and you draw your line. Okay, so when you draw your line, always use a pencil. Actually, always use a pencil when doing this anyway. Your line has an arrow at the beginning and at the end. So this is very important as well, because we can see that this specific graph doesn't stop. It doesn't stop there. Just because we've only drawn it to there doesn't mean it stops there. So this arrowhead and that arrowhead means that it continues until infinity. When we say that, we can also see that our x-axis and our y-axis also continue to infinity through positives and to negatives. Okay. The only time that this will not happen for your graph specifically is when they give you restrictions. So they tell you that your x values are not allowed to be negative, or your y values only fall between 1 and 7. Those are just mere examples that you can apply throughout your work. The standard format of a straight line is always y is equal to mx plus c. This is just a way of writing it, and the y can also be fx, but it just means that when we have any function, we can reorganize it so that we start with y is equal to something multiplied by x plus a c value. This c value can be a positive or a negative. So if we get a function that it does not start with y is equal to, you are allowed to manipulate it so that it becomes y is equal to. Please just remember to stick to the laws of equations and how you are allowed to manipulate it. Okay. In this formula, the exponent of x and y is therefore 1. This part is also very important, because if y was squared or x was to the power of 3, then it does not qualify to be a straight line. If x and y has to have an exponent of 1 only to qualify as a straight line. A straight line graph can also be referred to as a linear equation. Again, very important. Sometimes they talk about a linear graph, a linear equation. Sometimes they refer to it as a straight line. You should be able to differentiate between the two. That is today's lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it, and good luck with the work.